If you want to learn how to create a simple landscape watercolor using only 2 colors, then you need to watch this video. And then also Burnt Sienna by Winsor Newton. When you mix these 2 guys together, you get a beautiful gray, and they work next to each other really, really well. Just to take your brush, and you want to have clean water, and I'm using a Squirrel mop brush right now, and links to all this stuff, all the items I used in this video are going to be in the YouTube video description. And I'm going to turn this sideways for starters, and I'll come into here with just clean water. Go right through the tree area, don't worry about that. Get everything nice and wet. And this is why you want, Squirrel mops are great because they hold a lot of water, a lot of paint, and they stay wet for a long time too. So I use them quite a bit. And I'm switching to a smaller brush. This is my Richeson Silver Velvet. And I'm going to mix up a bunch of Ultramarine blue. I want to make sure it's not just straight paint. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this with the paper flat. I'm going to put some color down into here. And I'm going to start to bring this uphill a little bit. Now, this is going to be soft edge in the background because we start with the paper wet first. This is called wet into wet. When you work wet into wet, you're not going to get hard edges. If you want hard edges, you want to work on dry paper. But I wet the whole background first, and then I'm just trying to make this so it's not patterns. And I'm keeping the paper flat still too. And so this is going to start to read as trees in the background here. Now if you tilt the paper that direction, everything's going to go that way. So this is why I want things to be painted flat right now. And I'm not going to get hard edges in the tree area unless I come back up here. And if you want to get hard edges, come back up here while things are still wet and take out a little bit of that wetness. And then when you go back with some color, you're going to get a harder edge there. I don't mind some hard edges and some soft edges. It's supposed to be trees. It's not supposed to be perfect. It's a tree line in the background. You go back into things a little bit if you want to get them, re-wet them. The more you play around with it, the more kind of variety of movement you're going to get. And I'm going to turn that, see if I like what's going on here. I'm going to still play around with it a little bit. I'm actually going to lose this tree line a little bit. I could go down a little bit more here. So I'm dropping some thicker paint here. Thicker paint, less water. Won't move as much. I've skipped some sections of white areas in here, so it'll look like sunlight filtering through the trees. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to wake up the excess puddle. Actually, I'm going to leave it. I'm going to let that sit there. You want to throw down a few spots of water when things are starting to dry a little bit. You can start to see where the paper already is starting to dry a little bit. It's not as shiny. So if you spatter a little bit of water into those areas, you're going to get some water blossom effects. That also kind of looks like trees in the background. But you can't do too much with that, and you've got to let that sit flat. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to let that dry, then I'm going to go to the next stage. Okay, now when this layer is 1000% dry, not just 100%, then what you're going to do is you're going to take some more brown color, burnt sienna, and I'm going to come in here, and I'm using the same brush still. I could switch to a smaller one. And I want to come into here, and I want to do some trees in the background. So I'm not doing any drawing on these guys. I'm literally just coming into here and just drawing some tree shapes. Pretty basic. And again, don't make things go perfectly straight uphill. Trees always lean over. They've got all kinds of issues. You can lighten this up a little bit as it gets further away, with a paper towel, or you could just like dab or just take off some of the color. And I'm going to make a little bit of a tree branch go here. And a little bit bigger trunk down here, and then I'm going to put another tree, lighten that up just a little bit, more water, turn this a little bit sideways, so I'm going to put my hand in wet paint here. I'm going to make this guy come behind this tree. I'm going to go over this direction, and then over that way. So we want these guys have to be a little bit darker than what we did in the background. If it's too dark, dab with a paper towel, take off a little bit of it. Now let's put another little guy right here. I'm trying not to create patterns too much. I don't want the trees to all be equally equidistant from each other. So let's do another little branch there, and that guy goes there. Now let's put another one over here. This guy's coming down here a little bit. This guy's leaning that direction. We're just going to go right through. We're going to do the other trees. So, again, if it's too dark, just dab with the paper towel, take off some of the color while it's still wet. You can get that off pretty easily. And I'm going to do one more tree in the background over here. Make the trunk at the bottom a little bit thicker. Okay, so now we've got our trees done in the background. So already we've got a sense of depth. We've got these guys are coming forward because they're a little bit darker. We'll bring this downhill here just a little bit more. Now, while things are still, this is all still wet, I'm going to start working on the next part here, where I'm taking some more burnt sienna color, and I'm coming down to here where the water is going to be. And I'm going to put down some burnt sienna. I'm going to let that just grab some more color. Always have enough color mixed up, and always have your color nice and juicy and wet, so that when you're doing this, the paper's not drying on you. And that's super, super important. I'm always talking about that. Now I'm going right through this tree right here. I'm not worried about painting that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch, rinse my brush off, and I'm going to grab Ultramarine blue, which I guess I'm just going to have to put here right now. Now, ultramarine blue is pretty strong, so make sure you water it down a little bit. And I'm going to put ultramarine blue here before the burnt sienna, let them touch and kiss. And then I'm going to bring the burnt sienna down through the water area here. And I got to mix up some more of that burnt sienna. I thought that was way more than enough, but it is not. And that's why I keep my paints nice and juicy and ready to go. Because the more time you're doing the mixing on the palette, the less time you have on the paper, because the paper's drying on you. So I'm going to grab some burnt sienna now, bring it back down into here. So I didn't rinse my brush off completely, so I'm getting kind of a little muddy mixture, but that's all right. Down here I may want it to be a little bit darker anyway, so I'll mix together a little bit of burnt sienna with ultramarine blue. Drop that in there. Always changing that color temperature so it's not the same thing. And since we're using only two colors, we're not going to throw in like sap green or anything, because that'd be weird. Okay, I've dropped some of this color into the blue. And just seeing how I like things here, I'm going to bring this water bank over this direction a little bit more. So I'm going over my pencil lines. I'm just making this up, not looking at a reference photograph or anything. Okay, I'm going to bring it over that way too. Yeah, I think I'm going to stop there. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to let this dry, and then we're going to start working on the bigger trees. Okay, so the water's dry now. I did drop a little bit of blue into this while it was still wet, just to kind of knock it back. It was too much brown. And now what I'm doing is I'm going to mix up a relatively juicy mixture of the burnt sienna and ultramarine blue together on the palette. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start coming to the background here. I got to turn this sideways a little bit since I'm left-handed. And one thing I'm always doing when I paint is I'm constantly changing the color temperature a little bit. So I want this to be darker, but I want it to go back and forth between more ultramarine blue, more burnt sienna. And I just try not to create the same thing. I just don't want repetition. And so now I'm making this even darker than the background trees. And what this is going to do is this is going to make those trees come forward. Yet again, it's going to create another sense of depth. And I'll do some smaller branches right there. See how that's coming forward now because it's darker than the trees that are behind it? And I'll turn this upside down real quick so I'm not sticking my hand in a wet paint. Now what we don't have yet, and we're going to work on that in a second, is a light source for this painting. I'm not worried about that yet. So I'm doing this upside down so I don't stick my hand in that wet tree over there. And being left-handed, that's what happens. So I put my hand in wet paint down there. Okay. Put a little tree branch that goes that direction. If you don't paint over your pencil lines, you can erase them later. I'll make a little branch that goes that way. So I start doing some smaller branches too. I don't like this tree shape. I don't like that branch shape right there, but actually that's okay. I don't mind that. So now you can see this is coming forward and that's coming forward, and those are pushing into the background. Now for this tree here in the foreground, I want this guy to be one of the darkest trees in the whole painting. When you're trying to get the darkest darks, the thing you have to remember, and this is the key, is you've got to use more paint, less water. And you've got to have dark enough colors too. So if you're trying to make a black out of something that's an orange or a yellow, it's not going to really work very well. You got to have a dark varied color. So you can see how this looks even darker than those other two trees I just painted. And to keep my hand out of wet paint, I'm turning it this direction. Nothing worse than putting your hand into wet paint. Though I mean, if it's watercolor, it's going to come out, but still, it's just. So that branch goes off there. Let's have another little branch go that way. And grabbing more paint, less water. And I kind of changed the shape there because it was stacking right on top of that other tree. So just make it come forward or go backward. So there's another branch there. There's another branch there. And now hopefully that reads as our foreground tree. What I'm going to do is, while this is still wet, I'm going to bring a lot of color down here. Make this a little bit darker here. And then what we got to start working on is, as I said earlier, you've got to have a source of light in this painting. Light source has to be coming from someplace. You've got to have shadows. Otherwise it doesn't read as trees very well. It reads as trees, but messes up the whole foreground. So what I'm doing is I'm mixing up some ultramarine blue. And I'm going to use pretty much ultramarine blue for the shadows. So what I'm going to do in the background here is, while things are still wet, I'm going to very carefully, not putting my hand into wet paint, come over here and put a little bit of a blue shadow. It's a little bit too strong. Dab it off with a paper towel. I'm going to make just a little, so everything's light source is coming from the left hand side. Don't touch that wet tree yet. So every tree's got to have a shadow. And sometimes you're going to find that shadows are going to come from off the page too, because there's trees we can't see, which is okay. So I'm putting down some blue shadows. And sometimes the shadow might start beforehand if there's some stuff going on in the foreground. Try not to touch this wet tree again. I'm going to bring this all the way down here to the bank, the river. I'm going to go with a finer brush and just do some little detailing up in here where there's other tree shadows coming down. Put one that goes through there. And if I do this over here, I have to have tree shadows going this direction too. So now over here, let's do this shadow going that way. And with these guys, they've also got shadows, albeit smaller ones because they're in the background. And the same thing here. Remember, you don't want these shadows in the background to be as dark, but so there's some schmutzick stuff going over there. So now we're starting to get shadows on this, and this is starting to look three-dimensional. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to mix up some stronger blue. And again, I usually do wait for everything to dry between layers, but I'm doing this kind of just a quick demo just to show you guys. Okay, so now I'm grabbing the blue, dragging it across the surface. What I'm trying to do now is I'm trying to get a dry brush effect. And dry brush marks are when you drag the color across the surface, and it gives that beautiful textural effect. And now we've got trees, we've got 3 layers, foreground, middle ground, background. This is the darkest tree, this is coming forward. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to grab a smaller brush. This is a rigger brush. And I'm going to take some of my color, put a little bit more orange, burnt sienna back into it. And while things are still wet, I'm going to come into here, and this is what I call a little calligraphy. So just have some grasses sticking out here. Doesn't have to be too much, just more things are closer to the foreground, the more details they're going to have. So I like to do a little bit of spattering to the foreground also. We've got a little bit of some grasses sticking out on the side of the tree in the foreground. Let's just do a little bit back in here. You know, that shadow is still wet, so that's why we're getting kind of a soft edge right there. But see, we've got just some random grasses sticking up. I'm going to turn this sideways so I can get some different looking marks. down here. I'll turn this sideways too because I want to go back up in here and get some different tree branch shapes, some finer ones. It's always good to have shapes going back behind things because then it kind of tells you that there's more a sense of hierarchy and depth. It's too strong, dab with a paper towel, hopefully a cleanish one, and take a look and see how this is doing here. Okay, actually, I think what I'm going to do here, this is almost done. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to grab another silver velvet brush. This is a smaller one. This is a number 6. And I'm going to grab mostly blue, ultramarine blue, mixed with a little bit of my burnt sienna. And I want to have a little bit of a shadow of a tree that we can't see coming off this side here. So that guy's invisible, but as it gets down to here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag some of this blue paint because this is kind of going downhill a little bit, so some of that shadow extends down into there. And I'm going to grab some more of this blue paint, make it a little thicker up in there. Let's do a little bit more of a brand of shape here. So these are just trees we can't see, which are off to the side here. And now the sunlight's coming from this direction, and I put a little bit of a shadow over here on this area where the snow is. Maybe I need to have a little indentation of a shadow like right here. And then I could also do just a little bit of just additional little detailing in here for shadows. Doesn't have to be too much. This already has, we already have a good sense of where the light's coming from. It's coming from that side. The shadows are going that direction. We've got lighter areas, lighter trees, darker trees. It gives us a sense of depth and perspective. What I'm going to do is I want to get just a couple more darker spots of some things. Here's in the foreground. Try not to create too many patterns. And that painting is done. That is the easiest painting you can do in the world. Only using 2 colors, winter landscape, a couple layers, less than, what, 10 minutes? Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you got any questions, put some comments in the YouTube videos. I will answer them, or send me emails. And thank you so much. If you like this content, hit subscribe. I'll have more watercolor tutorials in the future. Thanks a lot, and happy painting.